Have you ever heard a story so unbelievable it leaves you breathless? This is one of those stories. A fierce winter storm, a silent river hiding a desperate soul, and a toddler, the only one who could hear a German shepherd's silent cries for help. What followed next would change a family, a town, and eventually, the world. This isn't just a tale of rescue. It's a testament to the power of quiet heroes, to listening when no one else does, and to the bond between a child and a dog that defied all odds. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe to Pawprints Forever, your home for heartwarming animal stories that celebrate compassion, second chances, and the love we never see coming. Like this video, share it with someone who believes in miracles, and comment below where in the world you're watching from. We'd love to hear your story too. Now settle in, because what you're about to hear will stay with you forever. The sky over Chestnut Valley was steel grey, heavy with the threat of snow. Winter had come early that year, wrapping the town in a blanket of frost that turned roads slick and lakes into sheets of silent danger. Families huddled inside with mugs of cocoa and thick quilts, fireplaces roaring against the biting cold. But out in the wilderness, past the tree line, beyond the broken fence of an old abandoned homestead, a desperate cry sliced through the wind. Not loud, not even human, but full of pain, and only one soul could hear it. Inside the Whitaker home, 18-month-old Noah was already awake. He stood in his crib, gripping the wooden rails, his tiny form bundled in a blue fleece onesie with yellow stars. His wide, hazel eyes were fixed on the frosted window. He was humming. Not babbling, not crying, just humming. From the hallway, his mother, Laura, peeked in. "Good morning, my sweet boy," she whispered, brushing hair from her tired face. She hadn't slept well. The baby monitor had gone quiet just before dawn, and something about that silence unnerved her. Noah turned toward her and pointed at the window. "Mama," he said. "Dog." Laura blinked. "What?" "Dog," he said again, tapping the glass. She walked over and looked out. The trees stood still. The snow-covered hills sloped gently toward the frozen edge of the river below. Nothing moved. "No dog, honey. Just snow," she said softly, scooping him into her arms. But Noah wouldn't stop staring. And somewhere, hidden behind the icy winds and distant pines, a German shepherd fought to stay above the surface of a freezing river. The dog had fallen hours earlier. Chasing a rabbit through the woods, he had misjudged the bank. Ice that had looked solid from above had given way beneath his weight. The river had pulled him in, and now his body was weak from the cold, his legs barely moving. His cries had dwindled to whimpers, his snout just above the swirling water. He didn't know how much longer he could hold on. He didn't know anyone was listening. But Noah was. Laura went about her morning with Noah in her arms. She made coffee, fed the baby, turned on the news. But something felt wrong. Noah was unusually quiet. He wasn't playing with his favorite blocks. He didn't even touch his applesauce. He just stared out the window, clutching his sippy cup and whispering, "Dog, cold." After the third time, Laura knelt beside him. "You keep saying dog. Did you see one, baby?" Noah nodded, pointing toward the woods. Wet. A chill ran up her spine. Was it just toddler imagination? Or was something more going on? 2 miles away, in a cabin tucked near the river bend, an elderly man named Hank pulled on his boots and zipped up his heavy flannel coat. He was used to the cold, had lived through blizzards and blackouts, but something had dragged him from his bed that morning. A sound. A strange echo. It hadn't lasted long, but it had stirred something in him. He grabbed his binoculars, slung his thermos over his shoulder, and stepped out into the cold. Back at the Whitaker house, Laura tried to distract Noah with cartoons. He wasn't having it. "Mama, go. Dog wet." She laughed nervously, but something inside her, some ancient mother's instinct, tightened. What if he had heard something? They lived near the river. People walked their dogs through the woods all the time. Maybe someone had lost one. She checked the local Facebook group. No lost dog posts, no alerts. Still, she bundled Noah into his snowsuit, grabbed a blanket and a thermos of hot milk, and decided to take a short walk, just in case. The path behind their house led to a trail used mostly by hikers and snowmobilers. Laura trudged slowly, Noah strapped against her chest in a baby carrier. He was quiet now, but alert. His little mittened hand pointed ahead. After about 20 minutes, Laura paused. Her breath fogged the air. The river was visible just through the thinning trees. Then Noah made a sound, a gasp. He pointed again. "Dog!" Laura looked sharply. And there, through the brush and across the frozen embankment, she saw movement. Something dark, struggling. She moved closer, her heart caught in her throat. A German shepherd, soaked, shivering and clinging to the jagged edge of ice, was pawing at the snow with what little strength he had left. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Noah, you were right." She yanked out her phone. No signal. No service in the hollow. And she didn't dare get too close to the ice, not with the baby. She looked down the trail, heart racing. She had to find help. But before she turned, the dog looked up, right into her eyes, and whined, low, begging. Noah reached out of the carrier and waved. "Hi, dog." The German shepherd whimpered again. Laura's mind raced. She needed rope, a sled, anything. And fast. "I'll come back," she said aloud. "Stay, boy. I'll be back." She turned and ran. From the ridge above, binoculars zoomed in. Hank had found them. His old heart kicked into gear. "Hold on, boy," he murmured. "You got eyes on you now." Laura's boots pounded through the snow as she sprinted back up the trail, her legs slipping on icy patches, her breath sharp and burning in her chest. She kept one arm wrapped tight around Noah, who clung to her without a sound, his wide eyes locked behind them toward the river where the dog still struggled. She didn't know how much longer he had, and that terrified her. By the time she reached the house, her hands were shaking. She laid Noah on the couch, wrapped him in a blanket, and grabbed the landline phone. Her fingers slipped on the buttons as she punched in 911. "Emergency services, what's your—" "There's a dog. He's trapped in the river. The ice broke and he's stuck. He's been in the water a long time. He's going to die if no one gets there soon." The dispatcher's voice stayed calm. "Okay, Mom, I need the exact location. Are you calling from the site?" "No," Laura gasped. "I came back to call. My baby is with me. I couldn't get close." "He's near the bend in Chestnut River, where the old logging trail cuts through. Please hurry." "We're dispatching a rescue unit now. Do not attempt to reach the dog yourself. Stay on the line." But Laura was already grabbing rope from the garage. Back near the riverbank, Hank descended the hill with the sure footing of someone who'd been walking it for decades. He carried a walking stick and a coil of climbing rope strapped across his back. As he neared the river, the wind hit harder, but the dog, still clinging to the edge, looked up again. They locked eyes. "You poor thing," Hank murmured. "You've been calling all morning, haven't you?" He scanned the ice. It looked unstable. The water swirled angrily below the broken shelf where the dog was half submerged. His rear legs were beneath the surface, muscles straining to keep his head above the waterline. It was a miracle he hadn't been swept away. Hank moved quickly, anchoring one end of his rope to a thick pine tree and inching forward on his stomach, slowly distributing his weight. The dog whimpered when he saw him. "It's okay, buddy," Hank whispered. "I hear you now. We all do." Laura burst back onto the trail just as the faint wail of sirens echoed through the trees. She skidded to a halt, heart pounding, and spotted movement across the river. An older man, flat on his belly, was crawling toward the dog. "Oh my God," she gasped. Noah, still bundled tightly against her chest, turned and pointed. "Man help dog." The German shepherd's strength was fading. His eyes were glazed, his limbs trembling from cold and exhaustion. His paws scraped weakly at the icy edge as the current tugged relentlessly at his hindquarters. Hank reached him, just close enough. "Easy now," he muttered, looping the rope with practiced hands. He secured it around the dog's upper body, gently weaving it under one armpit. The shepherd didn't resist, just let out a soft, pitiful groan. "I've got you," Hank said. He gave 2 sharp tugs on the rope, signaling the tension anchor at the pine tree, and began to back up inch by inch. The ice groaned beneath him. The dog slipped. For one terrifying moment, it looked like both of them would fall through. But the rope held. And with one final yank, Hank pulled the shepherd onto solid ground. The dog collapsed on the snow, heaving shallow, gasping breaths. His fur was soaked, chunks of ice clinging to his legs. But he was alive. Paramedics rushed in seconds later, sprinting through the woods, followed by a rescue team with a stretcher, blankets, and thermal wraps. They swarmed around the dog with gentle urgency. "Pulse weak. He's hypothermic. Get the thermal pads under him, quick. Who found him?" Hank stood to the side, brushing snow from his knees. "A lady with a baby. She saw him first, ran to get help." Laura stepped forward, cradling Noah. "It wasn't me," she said softly. "It was him." The medic glanced at her, confused. Laura smiled. He heard the dog before anyone else did. They lifted the German shepherd onto the stretcher, wrapping him in insulated cloth and securing him for transport. As they began to move, Noah leaned toward the dog. "Cold," he said softly. "Go warm now." The dog's ear twitched, and his eyes, half-lidded, rimmed with frost, fluttered open just long enough to meet Noah's. Laura blinked back tears. It felt like a thank you. At the veterinary hospital on the edge of town, the German shepherd was admitted immediately into emergency care. His temperature was dangerously low, and his body had begun to shut down from prolonged exposure. But the vet, a kind-eyed woman named Dr. Ramirez, wasn't ready to give up. "He's a fighter," she told the team. "He made it this far. Let's make sure he goes farther." The news spread quickly. "A dog found clinging to life in the freezing Chestnut River," one headline read. "Saved by a hiker and a baby who heard his cries." Calls flooded the rescue center. No one knew where the dog had come from. He had no tags, no microchip, just a worn leather collar with the name Max barely etched into the buckle. Back at home, Laura sat on the floor with Noah in her lap, watching the local news replay footage of the rescue. Noah pointed to the screen. "Max," he said. Laura smiled. "That's right." Then, quietly, she added, "You found him." In the ICU at the animal hospital, Max slept under warm blankets. His body had survived the cold, but no one knew yet what his heart had survived, and who would help him heal next. Snow continued to fall lightly over Chestnut Valley as Max lay in the sterile quiet of the veterinary ICU. His body was swaddled in warmed towels and thermal wraps, his breathing shallow but steady. An IV bag hung nearby, pumping warm fluids into his bloodstream. A heating pad pulsed beneath him. His ears flicked every now and then, an involuntary response, but he didn't move. He was alive. Barely, but alive. Dr. Ramirez stood at the observation window, arms crossed, her face calm but focused. Next to her, a young technician named Chloe adjusted Max's vitals on the monitor. "How long was he in the water again?" Chloe asked quietly. "At least 2 hours, maybe more," Dr. Ramirez said. "It's a miracle he didn't go into cardiac arrest." Chloe bit her lip. "Is he going to wake up?" Dr. Ramirez exhaled slowly. "If he made it through the night, I'd say he has a good chance." She reached out and gently placed her hand on Max's head. "You've already made it through the worst, boy. Let's just get you home." But Max had no home to return to. Not yet. The next morning, Laura bundled Noah into the car and drove to the animal hospital. She hadn't stopped thinking about the dog, the way his eyes had locked with Noah's, how his paw had twitched when they said goodbye. Something in her chest pulled at her. She needed to know he was okay. The receptionist was surprised to see them. "You were the one who found him, right?" she said, looking at Noah with a warm smile. "He's doing better today. Still not up, but his vitals are improving. Dr. Ramirez will be out in just a minute." Inside the ICU, Max's breathing had become steadier. His ears now moved more deliberately. His paws twitched from time to time. Dr. Ramirez was checking his IV line when she heard soft footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Noah toddling in, guided gently by Laura. The baby stopped in front of the glass window separating the ICU from the hallway. He pressed both palms to the glass and whispered, "Hi, Max." Max's ears twitched again, and then, slowly, his eyes opened. It was brief. Just a flutter, a blink. But it was the first time since the rescue that he had opened his eyes on his own. Dr. Ramirez's eyebrows lifted. She looked back at Laura. "That's the first sign of responsiveness we've had." Laura's breath caught in her throat. Noah's been asking about him every day. "Well," Dr. Ramirez said with a warm smile, "looks like Max's ears are still tuned to him." Over the next 2 days, Max made slow but promising progress. He began to eat small amounts of warm food. He lifted his head without assistance. He even tried to sit up once, though his muscles trembled from the effort. And every time Noah came to visit, pressing his little hands to the glass, babbling softly, Max responded. Not with barking, not with tail wagging, just calm, steady, present. On the 3rd day, Laura found herself sitting in the waiting room when Dr. Ramirez approached with a clipboard. "He's stable enough now to leave the ICU," she said. "We're moving him to a recovery kennel. Still under close observation, of course." Laura nodded. "What happens next?" "No one's claimed him yet." Dr. Ramirez shook her head. "We posted to every shelter and lost pet group within 100 miles. No tags, no chip. No one has come forward." "Then what happens to him?" "Well," she said carefully, "once he's fully recovered, he'll be placed with a rescue. Possibly a foster home if one becomes available." Laura bit her lip. Noah, playing with a plastic truck in the corner, looked up and called, "Max." Dr. Ramirez smiled softly. "Or we find out if Max already found where he belongs." Later that evening, Laura sat on the couch with her laptop open. She scrolled through the posts in the Chestnut Valley Facebook group. One photo of Max had already been shared over 200 times. People had commented things like, "Can't believe he survived in that river. I hope someone takes him in. He deserves peace. That baby and that dog, something special there." Laura scrolled through the comments, her heart tightening with every image of Max's battered body, remembering the icy water and Noah's tiny voice whispering dog. Wet. She closed the laptop and looked over at her son, now fast asleep with his bobcat plush cradled against his cheek. Then she whispered to the dark room, "Maybe it wasn't just us who saved Max. Maybe he saved something in us too." At the vet clinic, Max stirred in his kennel. His eyes opened fully now, alert but cautious. The warmth of the blankets around him felt strange, but not unwelcome. He didn't understand what had happened. All he remembered was water, pain, and a sound. Not just any sound. A baby's voice. Soft. Kind. Calling him back. 3 days after Max was moved out of the ICU, a remarkable thing happened. For the first time since his rescue, he stood up. It wasn't graceful. His legs trembled under the weight of his recovering muscles, and he needed to lean against the kennel wall to steady himself. But he stood. Chloe, the vet tech, gasped from the other side of the glass. "Dr. Ramirez, he's up." The moment was small, but monumental. And not long after that, Max took his first slow steps inside the clinic's rehab yard, guided gently by a harness and Chloe's patient hands. Meanwhile, back at home, Noah had developed a new routine of his own. Every morning after breakfast, he would walk to the window in the living room, press his forehead to the glass and say, "Max okay?" He said it like it was a prayer. Laura always knelt beside him. "He's getting better, sweetheart." Noah would smile, whisper, "Good boy," then run off to play. But the look in his eyes said he understood far more than he could say. The clinic allowed Laura and Noah to visit again that weekend. Max, now able to walk with help, had been moved to a quiet recovery room with soft mats, heated lamps, and a wide observation window. When they arrived, he was curled in the corner, his ears twitching at the sound of their footsteps. Then slowly he rose. And when Noah toddled up to the glass, Max walked, without prompting, to the window and pressed his nose to it. "Max!" Noah squealed. Max didn't wag his tail, didn't bark. But his ears perked and his eyes softened in that unmistakable way that said, "You're the one who came back." Dr. Ramirez stepped beside Laura and crossed her arms. "You know," she said with a quiet smile, "I've worked with animals for 20 years, seen thousands come through that door, and some of them find someone." Laura glanced at her. "You mean like a new owner?" Dr. Ramirez shook her head. "I mean someone they recognize on a soul-deep level, like they remember each other even if they've never met. Max looks at Noah like that." Laura swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "He hasn't made that connection with anyone else." "No," Dr. Ramirez said simply. "Only your son." By the time they left the clinic that afternoon, Laura knew. She hadn't spoken to Will about it yet. Her husband was working out of state on a short-term construction contract, but she could already feel the answer forming. Max belonged with them. Or rather, they belonged with him. That night, Laura bundled Noah into his pajamas and tucked him into bed. He reached for his bobcat plush, but before he fell asleep he said something that stopped her in her tracks. "Mama," he whispered, "Max come home." Laura leaned down. "You want Max to come home?" Noah shook his head. He already did. The next morning, Laura returned to the clinic alone. She waited until Max was in the rehab yard, limping slowly through the snow-covered grass, sniffing the corners of the fence. He was alert now, stronger. His fur had begun to regain its sheen, and for the first time, he looked like a dog, not a ghost. Dr. Ramirez met her at the edge of the yard. "Have you thought more about what you want to do?" Laura nodded. "I want to apply to foster him. If no one claims him, I want him to stay with us." Dr. Ramirez didn't hesitate. "We'd be honored. We've already marked you as his primary contact. All we need is the paperwork." Laura smiled. "Thank you." Later that day, a tech brought Max into the visitor room. No glass, no walls, just soft floor mats, a few toys, and space to breathe. Laura sat cross-legged on the floor, unsure how Max would respond to being this close without barriers. But Max walked over, slowly, carefully, and sat beside her. He didn't lean into her, didn't wag. He just sat, and let out a deep, low exhale, as if to say, "Okay, I'm ready." That evening, Laura FaceTimed Will for the first time since her visit to the clinic. She told him everything, about Max's progress, about Noah's bond, about her gut instinct that this was something they were meant to do. Will listened quietly, his face lit by the soft light of a motel lamp hundreds of miles away. "I trust you," he said finally. "If your heart says bring him home, then we will." "Thank you," Laura whispered. "Besides," Will added with a chuckle, "any dog who made it through a frozen river for our kid, yeah, I want to meet that dog." And so the preparations began. Laura rearranged the laundry room to make space for a dog bed. She bought bowls, blankets, chew toys. She printed out the foster application and filled it in with shaking hands. And at the bottom, under reason for interest in this animal, she wrote, "Because my baby heard his cry when no one else could. Because I think he saved us too." The next day, Max took 10 steps without stumbling. The staff cheered softly, but Max didn't look at them. He looked toward the door, waiting for the only voice that had called him back from the dark. A week after Laura submitted the foster application, the clinic gave the call she'd been waiting for. "Max is ready," Dr. Ramirez said warmly. "He's passed all the medical clearances. His vitals are stable. He's gained 5 pounds. He's walking on his own. It's time." Laura held the phone to her chest and took a shaky breath. It was happening. Max was coming home. Noah danced in circles on the living room rug, squealing when Laura told him the news. "Max come home. Max come home." "Yes, baby," Laura laughed. "He's coming home." She didn't tell him that Max still had a long road ahead. Trauma, physical therapy, rebuilding trust. All Noah knew was that the dog he'd found in the cold, his wet dog, was finally going to sleep under the same roof. That afternoon, Laura loaded the car with blankets, a spare leash, and the new collar she had picked out. Navy blue with a single silver tag etched with one word, Max. At the clinic, Dr. Ramirez met them at the door, clipboard in hand, and a smile on her face. He's excited, nervous maybe, but excited. Laura followed her through the back hallway to the large visitor room, where Max was waiting. The shepherd stood as they entered, his ears perked, tail still but not tense. When he saw Noah, his entire body softened. Noah giggled and clapped. "Hi, Max." Max took one step forward, then another. Noah stepped from Laura's side, toddled a few feet, and extended both arms. "Come home now?" Max lowered his head and nudged Noah gently in the chest. Not a push, not a paw, just a touch. It was the only answer needed. Dr. Ramirez crouched beside Max and patted his side. "He's yours now. No one ever came for him. And honestly, I think he's known this was coming since the river." Laura nodded, emotion thick in her throat. She clipped the collar around Max's neck and said softly, "Let's go home." The ride back was quiet. Max lay in the back seat, head resting on the folded blanket, his eyes half closed, ears occasionally flicking toward Noah's quiet hums from his car seat. It was the same sound he'd heard in the woods that day, the soft, wordless music of a child who had listened when the world did not. At the house, Laura led Max in slowly. He hesitated at the doorway, sniffing the air. Then, with Noah trotting ahead of him, he stepped over the threshold into warmth. The laundry room had been transformed into a cozy nook, his bed, a basket of toys, a water dish. He sniffed everything carefully, but made no mess. Later that evening, Laura sat on the floor with Noah while Max curled nearby. She watched them quietly. Max's body relaxed, his breathing calm, Noah reading him a picture book as if he could understand every word. "He's listening, Mama," Noah whispered. "I know," Laura replied. But it wasn't all easy. Max startled at loud noises, pots clanking, the doorbell ringing. He froze when strangers visited the porch. He sometimes whimpered in his sleep, legs twitching like he was swimming again, trying to escape something only he could see. But each time Noah would get up from his play area, pad over in his little socks and rest a hand on Max's paw. "It's okay now," he'd whisper, and Max would settle again. Over the following days, they fell into a rhythm. Morning walks around the yard, quiet evenings by the fireplace. Nap time, where Noah would curl up in his blanket and Max would lie nearby, always close enough to touch. Laura took photos, dozens of them. Max watching over Noah as he played with blocks. Noah giving Max a cracker, which Max gently refused. And one of the most heart-melting moments, Noah asleep on the dog bed, Max curled protectively around him like a sentry. She posted that one online with a simple caption, "From the river to the hearth, this is what rescue means." The post went viral within hours. People from all over the country commented, "I've never cried so hard over strangers. That baby saved his life, and now the dog is guarding his. Please make this a children's book." And quietly, Laura began to realize this wasn't just their story anymore. A week later, Will came home. When he stepped through the front door, travel bag over his shoulder, Max barked, a single sharp warning. Then Noah yelled, "Dada!" and ran to him. Max watched the reunion like a soldier returning from the field, alert, but no longer fearful. Will crouched down and held out his hand. Max stepped forward, sniffed, and licked it once. "You must be the legend," Will said with a grin. Max wagged his tail. That night, all four of them curled up in the living room, firelight flickering, snow falling outside, and a hush of peace in the air. Max's head rested on Laura's foot. Noah held his paw. And Will leaned over and said what they'd all felt for days. He was meant to be here. But none of them knew what lay ahead. That Max wasn't just a rescue. He was something more. And soon the world would know it too. The following morning, the family awoke to a soft knocking at the door. Snow dusted the porch like powdered sugar, and Max, ever vigilant, was already at the window, his ears perked and body alert. Will opened the door to find Chloe, the veterinary technician from the clinic, standing bundled in a red scarf, a clipboard clutched to her chest. "Morning," she said, smiling shyly. "Sorry to just drop by. I was on my way to the next town, but I wanted to leave these." She handed Laura a small folder. Inside were Max's full medical records, his recovery logs, rehab notes, and one more thing, something unexpected. A letter. Laura sat at the kitchen table while Noah nibbled on toast, and Max lay nearby, chewing quietly on a rubber bone. The letter was from Dr. Ramirez. It read, "Dear Laura and family, you've given Max more than a second chance. You've given him something few rescued animals ever find, a reason to trust again. I also wanted you to know that we submitted Max's story to the state's Hero Dog Committee. Every year, they honor dogs who've endured extraordinary hardship and gone on to impact their communities in meaningful ways. With your permission, we'd love to nominate him. Whether or not he wins anything, he's already our hero. Thank you for listening when no one else could. Warmly, Dr. Anna Ramirez." Laura's heart thudded in her chest. "Hero." She glanced over at Max, now resting his chin on Noah's leg while the little boy babbled softly about a toy truck. Max wagged his tail in a slow, thoughtful rhythm. Maybe he was a hero. Not the loud kind. Not the badge-wearing, medal-earning kind. But the kind who answered a call with his silence. Who gave his loyalty not in bark or bite, but in presence. She smiled and whispered, "Let's do it." The nomination process required a series of interviews, photos, and written statements. Dr. Ramirez offered to handle the veterinary documentation, while Laura submitted the story of Max's rescue from her perspective. She wrote everything. From Noah's first strange whispers by the window, to the mad sprint through snow, to the dog's eyes half frozen, still pleading from the riverbank. She ended with one simple truth. Max didn't just survive. He became part of something bigger than survival. He became family. Weeks passed. Winter deepened. But inside the Whitaker house, warmth blossomed in quiet, everyday miracles. Max began responding to commands, simple ones like sit, stay, come. He learned quickly, always eager to please, especially when Noah clapped and shouted, "Good boy," with pure delight. He took to guarding the crib at night, curling up just outside Noah's door, rising only when the baby stirred. He stopped flinching at loud noises. He started wagging more. Even his bark, once sharp and tense, took on a playful lilt. And more than once Laura caught Max staring at Noah the way old souls look at stars. like he knew something. Something big. Then came the call. It was late February when Laura answered the phone and heard the news. Max had been selected as a finalist. Out of over 1,300 nominations, the woman said, Max stood out not just for surviving, but for the bond he formed with your son. The judges were deeply moved. The awards ceremony would be held in spring, in the state capital. It wasn't a televised event, more intimate, dignified, heartfelt. But they wanted Max there. Front row. Laura sat down, breathless. We'll be there. The trip would be a first for them all. Noah had never left Chestnut Valley. Max had never ridden more than a few miles at a time. But something about it felt right, felt necessary. They booked a pet-friendly hotel, packed a weekend bag full of Noah's essentials, and prepared Max's travel crate, though Laura doubted he'd need it. Max didn't resist when they loaded him into the SUV. In fact, he sat tall in the back seat, ears up, gaze fixed on the passing trees, like he knew this journey meant something. Noah pointed at him every few miles. Max going to win prize. Laura laughed. Max already won, baby. At the awards event, Max wore a simple blue collar with a silver tag that gleamed under the lights. The venue was filled with therapy dogs, service animals, search and rescue K9S, every one of them a hero in their own right. But when Max walked onto the stage beside a curly-haired toddler who clutched his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world, the room stood still. A hush rippled through the audience, and then applause. Soft, then swelling, not for spectacle, but for something sacred, a bond too deep for words, too wild for explanation. Max didn't win the grand prize. That honor went to a military dog who had saved soldiers in combat. But Max received something perhaps more lasting, the Unspoken Heart Award, granted only when a story touches the selection committee beyond reason. When Max was called up again, he didn't bark, didn't leap. He simply sat beside Noah and accepted the medal with the quiet dignity of a king. The crowd rose to its feet, and more than one person wiped tears from their eyes as they whispered, "That dog, that baby, there's something else." Back home that night, Noah sat on the floor, turning the medal over in his tiny hands. "Max brave," he said proudly. Laura smiled. "He is." Noah looked up. "I heard him when he was sad, and now he hears me when I'm scared." Laura felt her throat close. She leaned down and kissed her son's forehead. "Yes, baby. That's what love does." Spring tiptoed into Chestnut Valley beneath pink skies and the gentle thaw of snowdrifts. Rivers ran faster now, no longer silent under ice. The trees began to bud, and songbirds returned with morning light. At the Whitaker home, the snow shovel had been replaced by a doormat that read, "Wipe your paws." It had a paw print on each corner, one large, three small. Max took to the change in seasons with a kind of cautious wonder. He still paused at the edge of puddles, still eyed rivers warily, but he walked further each day, sniffed deeper into the forest air, and even chased a few squirrels with tail-wagging enthusiasm. His body was stronger now, his gait surer. But it was his heart that had healed the most. One bright morning, Max sat on the front porch with Noah beside him, the two of them watching robins hop along the muddy driveway. Noah was wearing a red hoodie, his curls blowing gently in the breeze. He leaned against Max's side and said, "You feel warm now." Max let out a soft chuff, closing his eyes as if agreeing. Laura peeked through the window with her coffee in hand, smiling to herself. She no longer felt the urge to check if they were okay. They just were. That week, something unexpected happened. An envelope arrived. No return address, no postage stamp, just a handwritten note taped to the front door. Laura found it in the early evening after a grocery run. Inside was a photograph. Old, worn, slightly faded. It showed a German shepherd, very similar to Max, lying beside a woman in a folding chair, both of them smiling into the camera. On the back of the photo was a short message. His name was Maximus. He ran off one night during a storm. We searched but never found him. He was my late husband's dog. If this is him, thank you for saving him. He always loved children. No name, no phone number. Just closure, wrapped in ink and memory. Laura sat on the couch that night, the photo in her lap. Max lay at her feet, resting peacefully. Could it really be him? He had no microchip, no collar when they found him. But something about the image, the eyes, the posture, it matched. She didn't tell Noah. Not yet. Instead, she whispered to Max, "Were you loved before us?" Max blinked once, and then placed his paw gently over her foot. The seasons turned quickly. With summer came long walks through sun-dappled woods, lazy naps in the backyard, and days filled with sticky popsicles and muddy paws. Max followed Noah everywhere now, from the sandbox to the swing, from the bedroom to the garden hose. If Noah fell, Max was there. If Noah laughed, Max's tail wagged in rhythm. They were inseparable. One afternoon, Laura stood in the kitchen watching them through the window. Noah had lined up his plastic dinosaurs along the grass and was assigning each a voice. Max lay in the shade, ears twitching, listening attentively. It looked like nothing to an outsider, but Laura knew better. It was everything. That evening she decided to post the photo, the one from the envelope, on the local Facebook page. This photo was left on our door. We believe it may be Max, the shepherd rescued from the river this winter. If this is your dog, or you know who sent this, please reach out. We're grateful beyond words to have him in our lives. The post got dozens of shares, likes, and supportive comments. But no one claimed him. And quietly Laura was relieved. Max belonged here now, even if he once belonged somewhere else. Later that night, as Noah drifted off to sleep, Laura sat beside his bed and watched Max settle at the foot of it. "You're a guardian, aren't you?" she whispered. Max lifted his head slightly. "You knew to protect him from the start. You knew what he needed before any of us did." Max closed his eyes and let out a deep, slow breath. Laura placed a hand on his side. "You're more than a rescue, Max. You're a gift." The next day, something extraordinary happened. Noah spoke in a way he never had before. He stood in front of Max with his toy phone, pressing pretend buttons. "Hello," he said into it. "Max wants to talk to the birds." Then he handed the toy phone to the dog. "Here," he said. "Tell them you were in the river, but you're okay now." Max sniffed the plastic curiously, then sneezed. Noah giggled. Then he turned to Laura and said clearly, "Max used to be sad. Now he's not." It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. Clear. Certain. As if he knew. Later that night, Laura updated the journal she had been quietly keeping since the day of the rescue. She wrote, "Day 123. Max chases birds now. Noah tells stories. They don't just belong to each other. They grow each other." Outside, fireflies danced in the yard. And inside, a boy and his dog slept side by side, the only sound between them a matching rhythm of breaths. The town of Chestnut Valley loved stories. Small towns often do. And the tale of Max, the shepherd who survived a frozen river, thanks to the strange and special connection with a toddler, was one they never stopped telling. By midsummer, Max had become something of a local legend. At the corner cafe, someone painted his paw print on the wall, just beside the chalkboard menu. At the library, the children's section displayed a drawing of Max and Noah, done by a local 8-year-old. Max's thick ears and gentle eyes staring lovingly at the boy beside him. And at the town's summer fair, a small booth raised money for the local animal shelter. The banner read, "Every animal deserves a listener, inspired by Max and Noah." Laura didn't push any of it. But when she and Noah walked through the fair and people recognized Max, offering pets and praise, she saw something remarkable. Max never flinched anymore. That Sunday, the family visited the rescue shelter that had once offered to take Max before Laura stepped in. They brought food, toys, and blankets to donate. As they arrived, a girl about 10 years old sat cross-legged on the grass outside the fence. She was whispering to a skittish terrier on the other side. Max noticed her immediately. He trotted to the fence and sat calmly. The terrier, tense and whining moments before, began to relax. The girl looked up and gasped. "That's the river dog." Noah, clinging to Laura's hand, beamed. "He's Max." The girl stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. "My name's June. That little dog in there. She doesn't trust anybody." But she stopped crying when Max showed up. Laura looked down at Max, who now lay at the fence, still and steady, his gaze gentle. Something in her heart stirred. He wasn't just healing. He was helping others heal too. Back at home that night, Laura journaled again. Day 137. Max comforts other dogs now, like he remembers how it felt to wait. Noah calls him Brave Max, but I think Max would say the bravest thing he ever did was learn to love again. The following week, a letter arrived from the State Wildlife Office. It wasn't official business, just a short note, typed polite, addressed to the Whitaker family. "We've reviewed the reports of the rescue, the veterinary statements, and the local news coverage. Given Max's recovery, temperament, and behavior, we would like to invite him to be part of a new pilot program, training rescued animals for animal-assisted therapy in schools and pediatric settings. Participation is voluntary, and we understand he's part of your family, but based on what we've seen, he may be uniquely suited to helping others the way he helped Noah." Laura read it 3 times. Max, a therapy dog? She looked over at him lying in the sunroom, his head on Noah's lap as the toddler lined up tiny animal figurines along his back. She could already see the answer. Later that evening she called Jonas, the director at Wild Acres Sanctuary, who had helped advise Max's early care after the rescue. He was quiet on the other end of the line after she explained the letter. Then he said, "You know what Max did when you brought Noah to visit the sanctuary last month?" Laura smiled, laid by his side the whole time. "No," Jonas replied. "He positioned himself so that no other animal could come near Noah, not in a possessive way, in a protective one, like a working dog, but calm, no tension, no barking. He just watched." There was a pause. "He's already doing the job," Jonas said. "That letter's just catching up. Training wouldn't start until the fall." It was voluntary, gentle, slow-paced, designed to evaluate Max's responses and comfort level. Laura sat down with Will to talk it through. He listened, nodding slowly. "If Max wants it, we'll know," he said. "He always tells us without saying a word." The next morning, Laura took Max for a walk alone, just the 2 of them. No stroller, no noise. She stopped in the clearing near the riverbank, now thawed and lush with summer bloom. She knelt beside him and whispered, "Do you want to help others, Max? Like you helped us?" Max looked out over the water. The river no longer scared him. It moved gently now, and so did he. He took a single step forward, stood at the edge and sat down. Still, calm, watching the place where he was once pulled under. No trembling, only peace. Laura reached out and scratched his ear. "I think that's a yes." That evening she wrote 1 sentence in her journal. Day 142. Max went back to the river. This time, he didn't need saving. The first therapy training session was held in a quiet field behind Chestnut Valley Elementary School. It wasn't formal, not yet, just a trial visit to see how Max would respond to the world of children he didn't know. Laura arrived with Max just after 9 a.m., her nerves tightly coiled beneath a calm face. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater, and Max had on a new harness that read "In Training" in bold white letters across his side. Noah stayed home with Will, who had taken the morning off. Laura wanted to make sure Max was settled before reuniting him with a full room of kids. As they approached the registration tent, a woman in her early 40s stepped forward and smiled. "You must be Max's mum," she said warmly, holding out a hand. "I'm Grace, program coordinator." Laura chuckled. "That makes me sound like I gave birth to him." Grace grinned. "Honestly, feels like you did." The small group of therapy candidates, mostly dogs with foster families or adopted pets, was spread out across the field. There were golden retrievers, labs, a basset hound with a crooked walk, and one tiny pug who snored while awake. But none of them had a story like Max's. Grace led Laura and Max toward a shaded area with 3 children seated cross-legged on a rug, ages 6 through 9. They were soft-spoken, some wearing headphones, others clutching fidget toys. Each child had experienced trauma. One had lost a parent, another lived with severe anxiety, and the youngest hadn't spoken in nearly 6 months. Max approached the group calmly, his head slightly lowered in gentle curiosity. The children paused their whispers and looked up. One girl, red-haired with freckles and big eyes, leaned forward. "That's the river dog," she said, pointing. Max didn't react to the sudden movement. He simply sat, tall, still, present. Laura stood back, silent, as Grace gave a nod. "Okay, let's see what happens." The children were instructed to take turns offering Max a small treat from their open palms. One by one, they held out their hands. Max moved slowly, sniffing first, then gently licked the treat from each hand with careful precision. No jumping, no bark. Just quiet gratitude. Then the freckled girl reached out again, not with a treat this time, but with her fingers. Max lowered his head and pressed his forehead to her open palm. She gasped softly and whispered, "He's warm." The smallest child, Tommy, the one who hadn't spoken in half a year, tugged at the sleeve of Grace's coat. Grace knelt beside him. Tommy pointed to Max and said, "He's brave." Laura clapped a hand to her mouth. It was the first word the boy had spoken since the day his parents split in a violent argument 6 months earlier. Grace looked stunned. Then tears welled in her eyes. "Max," she whispered, "what are you doing to us?" Back at home that afternoon, Laura sat with Max on the porch swing. The sun dipped low, streaking the sky in tangerine and lavender. Noah came running out the door, toy airplane in hand. "Max!" he squealed. Max stood instantly, tail wagging, and trotted over. "Were you good boy?" Noah asked as he wrapped his arms around Max's neck. Max licked his cheek in reply. Laura smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Max helped someone today," she said. "A little boy who forgot how to speak." Max reminded him. Noah pulled back, thoughtful. Then with great seriousness he whispered, "Max makes quiet people feel safe." She had no idea how he understood that. But he did. The following week, Max was invited back again, and again, and again. Word spread quickly. He wasn't just a therapy dog in training. He was something else. He listened. One day, a special education teacher asked if Max could visit her class of sensory-sensitive students. They prepared a quiet corner with pillows and soft lights. Max entered the room with his usual calm. But one student, a tall, non-verbal boy named Caleb, froze the moment Max lay down beside him. Caleb began to rock softly, eyes locked on the dog. And then he leaned forward and laid his entire body across Max's back like a weighted blanket. Max didn't move, didn't twitch. He simply closed his eyes and breathed. Long, slow, healing breaths. The teacher sobbed quietly from the corner. Max wasn't trained to do this. He just knew. Later that night, Laura opened her journal. She wrote, Day 158. Max listens for voices that don't use words and answers them without sound. He was never broken. He was becoming. That same week, the town's local newspaper reached out for an interview. The article ran with the headline, "From Ice to Empathy, the dog who learned to heal others." It featured photos of Max with children, Max with Noah, and even Max at the river where it all began. And at the very end of the article, there was a quote from Laura that would be repeated across social media for months. "We thought we rescued him from the river, but he's the one pulling others out." Late summer stretched across Chestnut Valley, like honey poured from the sky, golden, warm, slow. Cicadas hummed in the trees, and the river where Max had once fought for his life now sparkled in the sunlight, lazy and calm. But for Max, things were anything but idle. His schedule had picked up. He was now a certified therapy dog in training, with standing invitations at 2 local schools, a pediatric clinic, and a trauma support group held in the community center every Tuesday evening. And through it all, he remained unchanged. Quiet. Still. Listening. One Tuesday, something unexpected happened. At the trauma group, Max was sitting beside a middle-aged man named Brian, a retired firefighter who hadn't spoken a full sentence in weeks. Max usually sat a few feet away from each participant, letting them approach him first. But that night, as Brian stared blankly at the floor, Max stood up, walked over, and sat at his feet, then gently rested his head on Brian's knee. The man flinched slightly. Then, he sobbed. He leaned forward, hands trembling, and whispered, "I could save her." The group leader didn't speak. No one did. They just let the silence hold him. And Max, too. Laura watched from the edge of the circle, tears sliding silently down her face. At home that night, Max didn't eat right away. He walked to Noah's room instead, circled 3 times at the foot of the bed, and lay down with a heavy sigh. Noah, now 4 and full of questions about everything, looked at him thoughtfully. "Max's heart is tired," he told Laura. She knelt beside the bed. "You think so?" Noah nodded. "He listens to too many hurts." The next morning, Max was back to his normal self, perched by the front window, tail wagging slightly when birds hopped near the porch. But Laura began to notice a pattern. The more sessions Max did, the quieter he became at home. Not anxious, not withdrawn, just softer, as though he needed space to reset. So they adjusted his schedule. Fewer visits, more walks, more Max days, as Noah called them, days of digging holes, chewing on sticks, and sleeping under the sun. He perked up again quickly. Max, like people, needed rest to keep giving. By early September, Max had become more than just a story in Chestnut Valley. He had become a symbol, a reminder that even broken things could grow again. Local news featured him monthly. A mural went up in the children's ward at the hospital, a painting of Max and Noah beneath a tree, watching a river glitter in the background. People stopped Laura in the grocery store just to thank her. But every time she said the same thing. "It wasn't me. It was a baby who listened and a dog who chose to come back." Then, one day, something changed. It was subtle. A shift in the wind. The first yellow leaf fell, and Max started barking again. Not fearfully, not anxiously, but playfully. At squirrels, at flying leaves, at the wind itself. It was the first time Laura had heard him bark in pure joy. Noah squealed with laughter. "Max is laughing." And he was, in the way dogs do, with their whole bodies. That night, Laura found an email waiting in her inbox. It was from a woman named Heather who ran an organization called Second Leash, a non-profit that trained rescued dogs for therapeutic visits to children of incarcerated parents. She had heard Max's story through one of the trauma group therapists and was reaching out with a simple question. Would Max be willing to help even more children, ones who have been forgotten the way he once was? Laura read the message twice, then looked at Max, curled at her feet. He looked up and wagged once. It would be a bigger program, regional even, involve travel, careful vetting, longer sessions. It would be up to Max, of course. So that weekend, Laura brought him to a trial run. They visited a community center 2 towns over. Inside were 10 kids, ages 5 to 12, all seated in a circle. Some were quiet, others restless. All of them had one thing in common: a parent behind bars. The room was tense. Until Max entered. He didn't bark, didn't strut. He just walked to the center of the circle, turned in a slow circle once, and then laid down. The tension broke like dawn. A boy with a buzz cut whispered, "Can I touch him?" Max didn't move. Didn't need to. He had already said yes. By the end of the session, 3 kids were lying beside him. 2 others had asked if he could come back every day. And one girl, no older than 6, kissed the top of his head and said, "I wish I was a dog so I could be held like this." Driving home that night, Laura cried quietly in the front seat. Max rested in the back, Noah beside him, already asleep with a hand wrapped in Max's fur. And as the moonlit road wound around the river they once feared, Max opened one eye and blinked. Slow, certain. That night, Laura journaled again. Day 173. Max barked at a leaf today. He also carried the weight of 3 children's grief. He is joy. He is medicine. He is both at once, and somehow, he never asks for anything in return. Autumn pressed on, turning the valley into a canvas of fire and gold. Trees swayed under the weight of amber leaves, and the air carried that earthy scent of change, the kind that sinks into your chest and reminds you that time, like water, always moves forward. Max moved with it, but he didn't rush. He walked at Noah's pace now, which meant slow, curious, full of pauses to marvel at pebbles or to watch ants carry crumbs 10 times their size. Max didn't just accompany. He waited. At the second leash program, Max's presence had now been requested for weekly sessions. Every Thursday afternoon, Laura and Max made the drive, sometimes with Noah, sometimes without. Max had a gift the staff couldn't explain. One boy who hadn't made eye contact with adults in months now looked Max in the eyes and spoke freely beside him. A girl who wet the bed every night at the group home began sleeping through the night after Max curled beside her during a stormy session. And one older teen, tough, withdrawn, scarred in ways deeper than bruises, once asked softly after petting Max for 10 minutes straight, "You think if I'd had a dog like this, I wouldn't be here?" Max didn't answer. He didn't have to. But the work took a toll. Laura noticed it first in the mornings. Max slept in longer now. He needed more rest between sessions. His tail wagged a little slower at the door. His eyes lingered longer at the edge of the trees when they walked. Not weary, not unhappy, just thoughtful. So they gave him more time. More days to simply be a dog, to wrestle with Noah on the rug, to dig pointless holes in the garden, to roll belly up in sun patches across the porch. Joy isn't loud, Laura had come to learn. Sometimes it's just presence without purpose. One night, Laura opened her journal and wrote, Day 180. Max is older now than when we found him. Not in age, in wisdom. He knows things. And he teaches without speaking. The next week brought something new. A documentary filmmaker working on a short series about animal-assisted trauma recovery reached out to the second leash program. She had heard about Max. She'd seen the articles. And she wanted to capture the story. Laura hesitated at first. Max's life had already become more public than she'd ever imagined. But the filmmaker, a soft-spoken woman named Elise, didn't want fanfare. Just truth. She promised it would be gentle. No lights, no drama. Just Max, his story, and the quiet ripple he created in the lives around him. Filming began 2 weeks later. It was subtle. Elise captured footage of Max walking beside Noah, curled up at therapy sessions, padding silently through fields lit by golden sun. She never asked for staged moments. She just waited, like Max did. And the story unfolded on its own. One of the most powerful moments came unexpectedly. They were filming at the river, the one where it all began. Laura hadn't been back to that exact spot since the rescue. It had taken months to feel brave enough. But Max led the way. He padded to the edge of the bank, where the reeds whispered in the wind, and sat. Still, tall, no fear, just memory and gratitude. Noah followed him, crouched beside him, and whispered, "We hear you now." It was unclear whether he meant Max, or the river, or something else. But Elise, filming quietly behind them, wept behind her camera. Weeks passed. The documentary was released online under the title, "The Dog Who Waited, How Listening Saved a Life." It went viral, not in a sensational way, but because it was real. Max, the river, the baby who heard him, the people he now helped. Millions watched, and millions wrote in, from all over the world. I showed this to my autistic son. He smiled for the first time in weeks. My daughter talks to her therapy dog now. She says he listens like Max does. I lost my German Shepherd last year. Watching Max was like hearing her voice again. Laura read every comment. She printed the ones that mentioned Noah and Max together and hung them on the wall of the sunroom, what they now called Max's room. Noah called them love letters. And in all the noise, Max remained unchanged. He still greeted the mail carrier with a wag, still curled up at the foot of Noah's bed, still waited by the river some days, not for rescue, but for reflection. Because now, Max chose to be there, where once he had been trapped. Now, he returned in strength. That night, Laura closed her journal with one final line. Day 192. He's not just surviving anymore. He's remembering who he was before the river, and choosing who to become after it. By early October, the air turned crisp with the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Pumpkins appeared on porches, and children ran through parks in jackets a little too big, arms out like wings. Max walked through it all like a king at peace with his kingdom, steady, loyal, a warm shadow never far from Noah's side. At 4 years old, Noah was more vocal than ever. He'd gone from gentle whispers to full conversations, often narrating his day to Max in great detail. Max, the leaves are falling because the trees are tired. Max, the moon followed us home again last night. Max, when I grow up, I want to be a dog. And Max, as always, listened. Laura noticed something curious in the way Max responded to Noah lately. It wasn't just attention, it was attunement. If Noah was sad, Max didn't just curl up nearby. He leaned in and rested his chin on the boy's lap. If Noah was overstimulated, Max would quietly block out the world, positioning his body between Noah and the source of noise. It was more than companionship. It was co-regulation. Laura had read about that term in child development books, but Max had never read anything, and he understood it better than anyone. One chilly morning, Laura received a call from Grace, the coordinator at Second Leash. "Hey, Laura, I wanted to run something by you," Grace said. "There's a new pilot program starting next month, small group sessions with children on the autism spectrum. Quiet space, sensory-friendly setup. We're only inviting 2 dogs to begin with, and we'd really love for Max to be one of them." Laura looked toward the backyard, where Max and Noah were lying side by side in a pile of leaves, Max's head resting on the boy's belly. "He's good with overstimulation," Laura said softly. "He senses when it's too much." Grace replied without hesitation, "That's exactly why we want him." The new program took place in a converted greenhouse, a long, sunlit room with soft rugs, hanging plants, and big windows that looked out onto a butterfly garden. It was peaceful, alive, and unlike any therapy space Laura had ever seen. On Max's first day there, the children sat in beanbags, some flapping their hands, others rocking gently, a few silent but wide-eyed. Max didn't rush them. He entered with calm energy, gave each child space, and then lay down in the middle of the room. No cues, no pressure, just presence. After 20 minutes, a boy named Micah, non-verbal, 6 years old and deeply sensitive to touch, slowly crawled across the rug. He reached Max, paused, then gently placed one hand on Max's back. Max didn't move. Micah stayed there, hand resting, face buried in fur. And the room breathed. The therapist watching in the corner mouthed, "Oh my God." Laura swallowed the lump in her throat. Max had done it again. Back at home, Laura started getting emails from parents whose children had met Max through the program. "My daughter finally sleeps through the night after petting Max for 5 minutes. My son asked if we could adopt a dog like him. He said, 'I want someone who hears me like Max does.' We've never seen our daughter respond to any animal. But Max, she ran to him. She said, 'He doesn't make my brain hurt.'" Laura printed every email. She made a scrapbook titled, "What Max Gave Back." It wasn't just for her, it was for Noah. Someday, she wanted him to understand what his tiny voice in that frosty window had started. One golden afternoon, Max and Noah sat on the porch steps, sharing a banana. Well, Noah shared. Max gently declined after sniffing it, but stayed anyway. "Mama?" Noah said, looking up. "Yes, sweetheart." "Did Max have a name before he met me?" Laura paused. "Well, someone might have called him something else, but I think when you found him and you said Max, he became Max." Noah nodded seriously. "I think he was waiting for someone to say his name the right way." Laura felt her throat tighten. "Maybe he was, baby." That night, Max crawled into his spot at the foot of Noah's bed without needing to be asked. Noah was already asleep, one small hand reaching toward the floor. Max curled around it. Outside, the wind rustled dry leaves down the sidewalk. Inside, a boy and his dog breathed in rhythm. And neither had to say a word to know. They were exactly where they belonged. Halloween approached with the smell of cinnamon in the air and carved pumpkins glowing on porches across the Chestnut Valley. For the first time since Max had joined the Whitakers, the little family planned to go trick-or-treating together. Noah was going as a firefighter, plastic helmet, yellow jacket, little red boots. And Max? He wore a soft red vest with the word "Rescue" stitched in white block letters. It wasn't a costume, not really. It was the truth. They walked house to house as dusk settled over the neighborhood. Other children squealed with excitement, running past them in capes and masks, plastic buckets swinging with candy. Max stayed close to Noah's side, unbothered by the noise, his head constantly scanning, gently alert. At one point, a loud animatronic ghost burst from a bush on one lawn. Several kids shrieked and ran. Noah froze. His little hand trembled. And Max stepped between him and the ghost, standing still, calm, protective, blocking the scare with his body. Noah placed his hand on Max's back, then whispered, "It's just a silly ghost." Laura blinked back tears. Max didn't bark. He didn't need to. He'd already done what he came for. Later that night, while Noah sorted his candy into neat piles, Laura posted a photo to her social media. It showed Max sitting proudly beside Noah in his firefighter outfit, both of them lit by porch light, a carved pumpkin glowing behind them. Her caption read, "A real rescuer beside a pretend one. One saved lives with quiet, the other with candy." The post reached over 100,000 likes in 2 days. The world still hadn't stopped watching Max. As the weeks rolled toward Thanksgiving, Grace reached out again. "We've been invited to do a special demonstration at a trauma-informed school across the state. It's mostly for the staff, counselors, therapists, teachers, learning about animal-assisted healing." She paused. "But they requested Max specifically." Laura hesitated. It was a long drive, 5 hours each way, and Max had never traveled that far. Still, Something in her gut said yes. Yes, she said. We'll go. They left just after sunrise. Will stayed home with Noah this time. They decided it was best for Max to focus without his little shadow for this trip. Max sat up in the back seat, head tilted toward the window as the hills rolled by, frost melting under the pink light of early morning. At one point, Laura looked in the rearview mirror and said, "You okay, buddy?" Max met her eyes and wagged once. The school was quiet and surrounded by tall pines. Inside the gymnasium, about 50 staff members sat on folding chairs, notebooks in hand. When Max entered, the room stilled. He walked in like he always did, low, gentle, curious. And then the principal, a man in his 50s with tired eyes, stood and spoke. He told the story of a dog trapped in a frozen river, of a baby who heard his cries, of what happened next. And then he asked, "Can a dog like this teach us to listen?" Max sat beside him, eyes half-lidded, breathing slow. The answer was already in the silence. During the demonstration, one teacher, a woman who had just returned to work after losing her husband, knelt down and simply pressed her forehead to Max's. She didn't speak, but tears rolled from her eyes. Max didn't move. Laura watched, overwhelmed. She had no idea what pain that woman carried, but Max had already begun to carry it with her. On the drive home, Max lay stretched out on the seat, snoring gently. Laura turned the music down low and whispered, "You're not just a dog." She smiled. "You're a river guide." That night, Max returned to Noah's room and curled up in his usual spot. Noah stirred, eyes still closed, and whispered, "I knew you'd come back." Max licked the boy's hand and drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Laura journaled again. Day 208. Max stood in a gym full of strangers. He didn't perform, he didn't entertain, he held space, and somehow that was enough. It always is. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a sky the color of pearl and a soft layer of frost over every rooftop in Chestnut Valley. The Whitaker house smelled of cinnamon and roasting turkey. A fire crackled in the living room, and Max, as always, lay near Noah's feet while the little boy built towers out of wooden blocks. It would be their first Thanksgiving as a family of 4, Laura, Will, Noah, and Max. And Max, despite not taking a single bite of turkey, was very much at the center of it. As the table was set and dinner prepared, Laura took a quiet moment to reflect. Just a year ago, Max had been fighting for his life in a freezing river. Now he was family. Now he was healing others. Now he was home. After dinner, they sat around the fireplace. Noah snuggled into Laura's lap, warm and sleepy from mashed potatoes and pie. Will sipped cider, smiling quietly. Max lay with his head on Noah's legs, his body rising and falling with the rhythm of the boy's breath. Laura looked at them and said, "Let's start a new tradition." Will raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." Laura smiled. "Let's each say what we're grateful for, out loud." Noah clapped his hands. "I go first." He took a deep breath. "I'm thankful for Max." Max lifted his head, tail thumping gently. "And for bananas," Noah added seriously. Everyone laughed. Will leaned back in his chair. "I'm thankful for this home, for second chances." Laura nodded slowly. "And I'm thankful for listening, not just hearing, but really listening. Because that's how it all started." She reached down and scratched behind Max's ears. "And I'm thankful Max let us in." The next day, a knock came at the door. It was Grace, holding an envelope and wearing an expression that mixed pride and something deeper, something quiet and reverent. "We just received this," she said, handing Laura the envelope. "It's from a girl in one of Max's early therapy sessions." Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper covered in crayon drawings. Stick figures, a dog, a river. At the top, in careful block letters, it read, "When I feel scared, I think of Max. Because if Max came back from the river, I can come back from anything. Laura felt her breath catch in her throat. Behind her, Noah tiptoed in. He looked at the drawing and smiled. She knows. Knows what, baby? Laura asked. That Max is magic. Max's story had begun to take on a life of its own. The documentary continued to spread across parenting blogs, trauma support groups, and even military PTSD forums. Requests poured in. Could Max visit a hospital in the next town? Would he be open to meeting with wounded veterans? Could Laura and Noah come too? Each time Laura checked with Max. If his tail wagged and his posture stayed soft, she knew he was ready. If he stayed still, uncertain, she said no, because Max had earned the right to choose. He wasn't property. He was purpose. In early December, Max was invited to participate in a children's holiday reading event at the library. Local kids would gather in pajamas, sip hot cocoa, and read stories to the therapy dogs. Noah went too, of course. He brought his favorite book, The Brave Little Snow Fox, and sat cross-legged on a fuzzy rug beside Max. When his turn came, he opened the book and said, "I'm going to read to Max because Max read to me with his heart." No one corrected him, because in a way, he was right. As Noah read aloud, Max lay still, ears tilted forward. Other children joined in, some shyly, some boldly, some sitting down beside Max as if he were a fireplace himself, warm, calming, safe. And when the event ended, Max stood, stretched, and walked slowly to the exit. Just before they left, a librarian handed Laura a note scribbled in pencil by one of the children. "I like books, but I liked Max more. He made my voice come out braver." Laura folded it gently and tucked it into her coat pocket. Her hands trembled slightly. There were too many letters now to count. That night, Laura added a new page to the scrapbook. It read, Day 221. Max doesn't fix people. He doesn't heal them. He reminds them they were never broken to begin with. In the quiet of the living room, with snow beginning to fall outside, Laura whispered to Max, "You changed the world without saying a single word." Max rested his head on her foot, as if to say, "You listened, that's all it ever took." December wrapped the valley in a hush, white rooftops, icicle-laced fences, and trees dressed in frost. The world moved slower, softer. And in that silence, Max seemed to grow even quieter, as if the snow mirrored something deep inside him. But his eyes never lost their fire. He had work to do still. The Whitakers' Christmas season was simple. No flashing lights or inflatable decorations. Just a pine wreath on the door, candles in the windows, and a tree decorated mostly with Noah's handmade ornaments and paper pawprints that read, Max's First Christmas. Max didn't know what Christmas meant, of course, but he knew the house was warmer, full of laughter, full of love, and he never left Noah's side. One morning, Noah announced at breakfast, "Max needs a stocking." Will raised an eyebrow. "What would we even put in it?" Noah grinned. "Snowballs and socks and a chicken." Laura laughed into her coffee. "Let's stick to biscuits, sweetheart." They hung a red felt stocking by the fireplace that afternoon. It read, "Max Good Boy Year Round." That weekend, they returned to Second Leash for a special holiday session. The room had been transformed into a cozy winter wonderland. Twinkle lights, garlands, and an oversized storybook fireplace projected on the wall. The children arrived bundled in scarves and mittens, cheeks rosy, some bouncing with excitement, others standing back in quiet observation. Max entered slowly, tail swaying like a metronome set to calm. He padded across the room, greeting each child the same way with a nudge of the nose or a gentle look. He didn't force contact. He never did. He waited for permission, then gave his whole presence in return. One child stood apart. 7-year-old Evie. She'd only recently joined the program, referred by a counselor after losing her mother in a car accident. She hadn't spoken to anyone in 3 weeks. She watched Max from behind a beanbag, hands tucked under her arms. Max looked at her once, then again, then sat down facing her just a few feet away. For 10 minutes they did nothing but watch each other. Then Evie took a step forward, and another, then knelt. Her hand hovered over Max's back, uncertain. He leaned in, closing the distance for her. She touched him, just barely, then whispered her first words in weeks. "Hi, dog." Grace wept behind her clipboard. Laura sat beside her, stunned. And Max? He just blinked, calm, whole. That night, Laura wrote in her journal, Day 229. Evie spoke. Not to us. To Max. It's always Max. Maybe he doesn't heal people. Maybe he gives them permission to speak their own healing aloud. Christmas Eve arrived in a hush of falling snow. The house glowed with soft lights and candlelight dinners. Noah placed a plate of gingerbread cookies on the kitchen table and poured a small glass of milk. Then, with equal solemnity, he placed a dog biscuit next to it. "For Max," he said, "so he gets something too." That night, just before bed, Laura and Will sat with Noah by the tree. "What's your favorite thing about Christmas?" Will asked. Noah didn't hesitate. "Max." "Why Max?" Laura asked gently. "Because he hears when I don't say anything." Will blinked. Laura covered her heart. "Okay," Will said. "That's the best answer I've ever heard." Later, after Noah fell asleep, Laura found Max curled at the foot of the bed, head on his paws, eyes half closed but watching. She knelt beside him and whispered, "You've given so much, Max, and you never ask for anything." He didn't move. Didn't need to. She knew he understood. In the morning, Christmas arrived in squeals and wrapping paper. Noah tore into boxes, laughed, danced, and held up his favorite gift, a picture book titled Max and the Frozen River. It was handmade, bound in cloth, illustrated by a local artist who'd followed Max's journey since the beginning. Each page told a piece of the story. Noah sat in Max's bed, reading it aloud to him. "You were cold," he said softly, flipping to the first page. "But I found you." Max licked the boy's cheek, then rested his head in his lap. That evening the Whitakers sat around the tree. Snow continued to fall outside. The fireplace crackled. Max slept curled beside the hearth, one paw draped lazily across a plush toy shaped like a star. And in the silence, Laura realized something. Max wasn't just part of their story. He was the story. The one they told each other on long nights. The one they lived every day. The new year arrived quietly, with snow still blanketing the hills of Chestnut Valley and a hush in the air that felt almost sacred. For many, January was a season of starting over, but for Max, it was something else entirely. It was a season of returning to who he was before the river. And more importantly, who he'd become after it. One evening, while Laura was making dinner, she glanced out the window and froze. Max and Noah were in the backyard as usual, but this time, something was different. Noah stood at the edge of the frozen stream that cut along the back of their property. It wasn't the same river Max had nearly died in, but the ice was familiar. Max stood between the boy and the edge, not barking, not aggressive, but protective, still, tall. Noah looked back at him and said, "It's okay, Max, I'm just looking." Max didn't move. Laura stepped outside quietly and called them in. Max turned first, then Noah followed. But the message was clear. Max hadn't forgotten. And he would never let Noah go near water alone. That night, Laura lay awake, heart aching with gratitude. The trauma Max carried hadn't hardened him. It had made him a guardian. In the weeks that followed, the call started again. More schools, more therapy centers, more groups asking if Max could come. They weren't just curious anymore. They needed him. And while Laura was fiercely protective of Max's time and energy, she knew something had shifted in him. Max wanted to help. He needed to help. One crisp Wednesday morning, Laura and Max visited a pediatric oncology ward 2 towns over. The children were weak, pale but bright-eyed with hope and imagination that defied their circumstances. One girl, bald from chemo and barely strong enough to lift her arm, asked if Max could lie next to her. He did. She whispered stories into his ear. Max didn't understand the words, but he understood the pain behind them. When she fell asleep, her hand rested on his back. The nurses wiped tears from their cheeks. A volunteer therapist pulled Laura aside afterward. "Do you know what you've brought in here?" she asked, voice hushed with awe. Laura swallowed. "A rescue dog." The woman shook her head. "No, you brought in restoration." Back home that evening, Noah was unusually quiet. He sat on the living room rug, petting Max slowly, thoughtfully. "What's on your mind, baby?" Laura asked gently. Noah looked up. "Does Max know how many people love him?" Laura knelt beside him. "I think so." "I don't want him to ever forget," Noah said. Laura hugged him. "He won't, because he hears it. The way he heard you." Noah looked at Max. "I think he has a heart on the outside." Laura smiled. "That's a perfect way to say it." The next day, Laura received a call from Elise, the filmmaker who had created the documentary on Max. "It's being nominated," Elise said breathlessly, "for a National Short Doc Award. We're going to ceremony in March. I wanted you to come. And Max, if he's able." Laura sat down slowly. "Nominated?" "Yes. And they want to feature a live clip of Max with Noah, that moment by the fireplace. It moved people." Laura's hands trembled. "He's not just a local story anymore." "He never was," Elise replied. "The world just hadn't heard him yet." Laura shared the news with Will that evening. He hugged her tightly. "Do you think Max will be okay with all that attention?" "I'll ask him," she said softly. "He always tells me the truth." That night, she sat beside Max on the porch as snow drifted down like confetti from the stars. She told him everything. The nomination, the trip, the spotlight. Max rested his head on her lap and breathed, long and slow, and she knew. He was ready. As she watched the snow pile against the porch steps, Laura opened her phone and began typing a caption for her next post. She paused, then wrote, "Day 245. He was never just a dog. He was a storm survivor, a light bearer, a listener in a world too loud. And now, he's about to be heard by the whole world." March came in with grey skies and a restless wind. It brought with it the kind of change you don't see at first, but feel in your bones, like something big on the horizon. For Max, that change came in the form of a stage, and an audience, and the world finally watching. The award ceremony was held in a downtown theatre in a nearby city, nothing overwhelming but elegant enough that Laura bought Noah a tiny bow tie and cleaned Max's harness until it gleamed. They didn't dress Max up, no glittering accessories, no costumes. He wore his navy vest with the silver Max tag clipped to the front, because he didn't need anything else. He already was the story. Inside, the lights were warm and low. Cameras clicked softly. Attendees murmured in hushed excitement as the nominees were introduced. Laura sat with Noah and Will in the second row, Max resting at their feet. Max wasn't nervous. If anything, he was bored. He blinked slowly, occasionally turning his head when Noah whispered something into his ear. And when Elise's short film was announced, the entire room fell silent. The screen lit up with the first image, a still of Max in the snow, eyes wide, ears alert, standing behind a frost-covered fence. Then came Noah's voice. Just a few words. Soft. pure. I heard him. Nobody else did. But I heard Max. Gasps rippled through the room. Sniffles followed. The film, just under 10 minutes, wove the entire journey. The icy river, Noah's window, the rescue, the healing, the schoolchildren, the silent listening. And in the final moments it faded to black with these words. He never barked for help, but a baby answered anyway. The lights came up. No applause at first. Just reverence, then slowly everyone stood. A standing ovation, not just for Elise, but for Max, who, still curled at Noah's feet, lifted his head and wagged once, just once, as if to say, "It's okay, I'm here." Afterward, reporters approached. So did parents. And children. People who had watched the film and felt something in themselves shift. One woman knelt beside Max, tears spilling down her cheeks. "My son passed last year," she whispered. "He had autism, wouldn't speak to anyone except our old shepherd. Watching Max felt like seeing my boy again." Max leaned his head into her chest, pressing gently, not out of obligation, not for attention, just being with her, present and still. The woman closed her eyes and breathed deep, like she hadn't in years. Laura watched, her heart full and aching. How could a dog do this again and again, without ever tiring of giving? Later that evening, Elise approached with the event coordinator trailing close behind. She looked radiant, eyes red-rimmed from emotion but sparkling. "You won," she said simply. Laura blinked. "What?" Elise smiled. "Max won the Audience Impact Award. The people voted. There were bigger films, famous subjects, even a piece about rescue workers. But Max's story, they said it made them feel..." She reached down and stroked Max's neck. "He makes everyone feel something they didn't know they needed." The coordinator handed Laura a plaque. Nothing overly grand, just a wooden frame with engraved words. Audience Impact Award, The Dog Who Waited, featuring Max and Noah, for reminding the world to listen to the quiet ones. Noah danced around Max, waving his little hands, chanting, "Max, Max, Max." Max stood up and shook out his fur with one soft woof, then leaned into Noah's side. Will took a photo of the moment, Max with his eyes closed, Noah grinning ear to ear, the plaque resting between them. Laura didn't post it right away. She just kept it. Printed it. Framed it. Because some moments aren't meant to be shared. They're meant to be held. That night, in the quiet hotel room, Laura sat beside Max on the carpeted floor. She ran her fingers through his fur and whispered, "You changed so many lives just by surviving." Max licked her hand once and rested his head on her lap. The next morning, as the sun rose over the city skyline, Laura wrote in her journal from the small hotel desk. Day 259. He didn't win for tricks. He didn't win for skills. He won for stillness, for being, for staying beside others while they broke, and while they healed. Back in Chestnut Valley, the house felt warmer than ever. The community had watched the ceremony online. Dozens of neighbors dropped by with cards, dog treats, even framed sketches of Max. Kids mailed crayon drawings, strangers sent letters. But through it all, Max never changed. He still walked the same trail behind the house, still sat at Noah's feet while the boy built castles out of blocks, still watched the river from the ridge, still offered himself to the world, one quiet moment at a time. And now, more than ever, it felt like people had finally learned how to listen back. Spring came early to Chestnut Valley that year. The snow melted gently, not in sudden floods but in quiet retreat, revealing soft earth and green shoots below. The river that river ran clear now, not a place of fear or memory, but a symbol of movement and life. Max often sat near it, not as a guardian anymore, but as a witness. He no longer flinched when the wind passed over the water. Instead, he listened to it like an old friend. One sunny afternoon, Laura received an email from a national children's publishing house. They had seen the documentary, read the articles, followed the posts, and now they wanted to do something more. We would like to publish a children's book based on Max's story, From the River to Recovery, told through the eyes of a child, inspired by Noah. Laura blinked at the screen. She hadn't expected it, never sought it. But her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed 2 words. Yes, absolutely. Over the next month, she worked closely with an illustrator and writer to shape the book Max and the River's Whisper, a gentle lyrical story of a dog lost in the cold, a baby who heard what no one else could, and the bond that changed them both. The draft pages brought Laura to tears. Each illustration captured Max's eyes with such grace, such quiet depth, that it felt like he was breathing through the paper. And when Noah saw the mock-up, he whispered, "It's like a dream I had." Meanwhile, Max's therapy visits became even more tailored. Not just sessions in schools or hospitals, but one-on-one visits for children going through intense grief or trauma. Grace called it Max time. Just a half hour of space for a child and Max to be together. No expectations, no therapy agenda, just shared presence. One afternoon, Max was paired with a boy named Tyler, 10 years old, lost his sister to cancer, hadn't spoken a full sentence since the funeral. Tyler sat cross-legged, fists clenched. Max lay down across from him, close but not too close. 10 minutes passed in silence, then 20. Then Tyler reached out and placed his hand on Max's back. "I miss her." Just 3 words. The therapist turned away to cry. Max didn't react, just let the weight rest against him. When Laura picked Max up that day, Grace met her at the car. She didn't speak at first, just hugged her. Then she whispered, "I've never seen a soul like his." Laura held her a little longer than expected, because she knew. The children's book launched in early May. It wasn't a massive bestseller, but it didn't need to be. It made it into school libraries, into therapy offices, into the hands of children who didn't have the words yet, but now had pictures that spoke for them. And the dedication read, "To the ones who listen, and the ones who need to be heard, and to Max, who reminded us all that stillness is a kind of language." Back at home, life moved on at its own slow, beautiful pace. Noah started drawing more. One of his pictures showed Max with wings. Laura asked what they meant. "They're not angel wings," he said. "They're guardian wings, for when Max protects people in dreams." Laura didn't correct him, because deep down, she believed it too. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Day 273. There is no finish line for healing, no medal, no parade, just quiet progress, just Max, still showing up, still saving lives, one presence at a time." The summer sun returned in full, stretching long golden arms across Chestnut Valley and painting everything in hues of amber and warmth. The days grew slower, softer, and in that warm stillness, Max seemed to reach the deepest peace he had ever known. He no longer needed to be busy to be fulfilled. His purpose wasn't tied to the number of visits or the scope of attention. It was in his very presence, the way he existed in the world. Max still did his weekly visits, just 1 now, sometimes 2 if he was particularly energized. Laura had trimmed the schedule gently, respecting his age, his quiet signs. Grace understood. Everyone did. Because Max had already done more in 3 seasons than most therapy animals do in a lifetime. He had touched lives. But more than that, he had listened to them. And the world had finally learned to listen back. In July, the children's book Max and the River's Whisper received a national award for its impact on literacy programs in trauma-sensitive classrooms. Dozens of teachers wrote in with testimonies of how the book had opened doors to conversations their students had never dared enter before. One counselor wrote, "After reading Max's story, a student of mine told me he felt like the river sometimes, Cold, stuck, forgotten. But then he said, "Maybe someone like Max will hear me." Laura printed that letter and added it to the scrapbook. Noah, now nearly 5, helped paste it in. "Max helps even when he's not in the room," he said. Laura nodded. "He always will." One warm Sunday morning, they hosted a gathering at their home, a small thank you celebration for the people who had been part of Max's journey. Dr. Ramirez came. So did Chloe from the vet's office, Grace from Second Leash, and even Elise, the documentary filmmaker. They brought treats and laughter and stories that curled like smoke into the summer sky. Max lay under the shade of the old maple in the yard, belly to the cool earth, eyes blinking slowly as children wandered by to pet him or sit beside him. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was home. At one point, Elise knelt beside him and said, "I've filmed rescue dogs all over the country, but Max, he wasn't just rescued. He became the rescuer." Laura smiled. That's what happens when a baby listens and the world slows down long enough to hear a whisper. That night, after everyone had gone and the yard was quiet again, Noah knelt beside Max under the stars. "You're going to live forever," he whispered into Max's ear. Max didn't move, but his eyes stayed open, soft and calm, like he knew something Noah didn't. Later inside, Laura sat on the floor with Max beside her. His muzzle had begun to grey now, his steps were a touch slower, but his spirit remained untouched by time. She whispered, "You gave more than we ever could have asked for." Max nudged her hand with his nose. And Laura, heart full, said aloud what she'd carried in silence for too long. "You saved us, Max. You saved me." That evening she wrote in her journal, Day 287. Max is no longer a story being written. He is a legacy being lived. The final days of summer drifted in with a hush, like the soft exhale of a season well lived. The trees held their green a little longer, the evenings arrived gently, and Max's steps became slower, but still sure, still present, still full of quiet meaning. It had been almost a full year since he was pulled from that frozen river, since a baby heard what no one else did, since everything changed. One early morning in late August, Laura sat on the porch with a mug of tea as the horizon lit slowly with gold. Max lay at her feet. She reached down to scratch behind his ear, and he leaned into her touch, eyes half closed, tail giving one lazy thump. She whispered, "You remember this porch? That first night you came home? You were scared, barely breathing, but look at you now." Max lifted his head slightly, blinking at the quiet breeze. Laura smiled. "You taught us what resilience really means." Later that day, they took one last summer walk through the woods behind their home. Will held Noah's hand as the little boy pointed to butterflies and mushrooms. Laura followed behind, Max beside her, moving slow but steady. When they reached the riverbank, the same bend in the stream where Max liked to sit, they paused. Noah plopped down in the grass and patted the earth beside him. "Come, Max, time to rest." Max lay down beside him, head against Noah's leg. The river gurgled softly in the background, no longer a place of danger or fear, just memory, just peace. That evening, Max curled into his bed by the fireplace, his breathing slow and even. Noah sat beside him with a picture book open in his lap. He wasn't reading out loud anymore, just turning pages, letting the pictures speak for themselves. Max watched him, eyes soft. Then, without a word, Noah leaned down and whispered, "I still hear you, Max. Always." Sometime during the night while the house was asleep, Max let go. No pain, no fear, just stillness. The kind of stillness only a soul full of love can leave behind. Laura found him at dawn, curled in the same spot by the fire. His body still warm, his face at peace. She dropped to her knees beside him and buried her face into his fur, her heart breaking open not from grief, but from overwhelming gratitude. Will came quietly, placed a hand on her shoulder. Noah walked in next, rubbing his eyes, then froze when he saw Max. He didn't cry. He just crawled beside his friend, rested a hand on his paw and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." They buried Max under the maple tree in the backyard, the one where he had watched summer children run and grow. Laura placed a stone above the earth, etched with the words, "Max." He waited. He listened. He healed. Forever our riverlight. The outpouring of love came instantly. Cards, drawings, donations to shelters. A mural went up at the children's hospital, a painting of Max resting under the stars with a little boy holding his paw. The therapy center started a new training wing in his name, the Max Room, a space where animals and children could just be together in peace. And the children's book, now in its second printing, had a new final page. Sometimes the quietest heroes leave behind the loudest echoes. At home, Noah kept reading books to the empty bed beside the fire. He said Max still listened. Laura believed him. On the first snowy night of winter, Laura stood at the window and watched the flakes fall gently. She placed candle by Max's stone and wrote in her journal one final time. Day 300. He came from a river, froze in silence, and melted the world with listening. We didn't just rescue him, he rescued us all, and somehow I still hear him every single day. Max didn't just survive that freezing river. He became something more. A quiet guardian, a healer, a light that reached across hospital rooms, classrooms, and hearts that had forgotten how to hope. And even when his pawprints faded from the porch and his bed by the fire stood empty, his spirit lived on. In every child who whispered their first word, in every hand that reached for healing, and in every heart that learned to listen because of him. If this story moved you, please subscribe to Pawprints Forever for more unforgettable journeys of love, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between animals and the humans who need them. Like the video, share it with someone who still believes in quiet miracles, and leave us a comment. What part of Max's journey touched you the most? Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering Max. Because sometimes the world changes when one baby listens and one dog waits to be heard.